So with all those points, I'm going to ask Peter to come back and reply to the discussion.
Well, comrades, I think it's been a very good discussion. It's raised some really crucial points, and it was very good that some comrades, you know, outside who originate outside of Britain have given us their insights into the way that Thatcher is viewed. But this meeting tonight, for us, is not a question of going down memory lane, of recalling what Thatcherism was. It's a very simple saying which we've always operated from. Those who do not remember the lessons of history are doomed to repeat it. And we're discussing here today, not just from the point of view of the past. History is important insofar as it illuminates the tasks of the labour movement today. And I think all the contributions indicated the situation that we have at the present time. Because the point that was raised by the comrade from Italy, the comrade from Spain, and it was very good that those points came into this discussion, because this position in Britain is part of a European-wide crisis. But the difference between the different countries is that at different stages. And actually Italy has been propelled from here to the front rank of those countries that face serious crises at the present time. It's not just a question of Greece or of Spain. Spain and Italy are central now to the fate of the euro. It's possible that those two countries could actually bring the euro down because of the problems that exist and the incapacity of the working class, of the ruling class, to solve those problems on a capitalist basis. I mean, you have in Italy a very great revolutionary tradition, which we don't have to the same extent in Britain, except in the Socialist Party and what we did in the past, and to some extent in the Communist Party, despite its incorrect policies, programme and perspectives. The militants of that party did play a certain role, if you like, in the history of the working class. But when I mentioned Liverpool, we have to see that what happened in Liverpool between 1983 and 1987, it wasn't inevitable. You could have had a situation in Liverpool where if we wouldn't have been present and acted in the way that we did, people will be writing now about the impossibility of solving the problems of Liverpool, and Liverpool would have been thrown back enormously. We intervened. We were in the Labour Party then, which wasn't a socialist party, but was what we would call a bourgeois workers' party with a pro-capitalist leadership, but of the base amongst the working class. That's completely gone now. It's like PSOE in Spain. PSOE in Spain, Felipe González, when the Socialist Party started, after the overthrow, or restarted after the overthrow of Franco, and we had a certain influence in that party, especially in the youth wing, started off as a quasi-Marxist party, you could say, with Felipe González talking about socialism and so on. Mário Soares in Portugal flew in from Paris. They had about 50 members. They become a mass party, and he was talking about it being a Marxist party. In fact, Bob Lobby was on the streets of Lisbon, if I'm not mistaken, at that stage, distributing leaflets that he didn't understand in Portuguese to the Portuguese workers, putting forward a perspective for the development of the movement itself. And those parties, in words, stood for socialism. And I repeat, Spain and Portugal, especially Portugal, went a long way in that direction. In Italy, we had one of the most powerful communist parties in the world, which is now rotted because of the pro-capitalist position. Then we had Rifondazione, which offered hope, the RC. We have now the United Left in Spain, which offers a certain road. We have comrades in Spain who are working within that. The problem that's posed in Spain, in Italy and Spain, I'm speaking to the comrades collectively here, is the same problem that we have in Britain. There's a certain commonality of the problems of the working class. That this crisis, as Bob pointed out, is insurmountable, is unsolvable on the basis of capitalism. You haven't had a crisis of this character, really, for a century. If you take the position of Spain, it's not just a recession, it's a catastrophe, it is a depression. The unemployment figures are comparable to the situation in America in the 1930s. I mean, it's an absolute catastrophe facing the youth. The youth are scattered to the four corners of Europe now, to Britain, a lot of the youth in Greece are going to Canada. Canada seems to be Canada and Australia, the only escape route for workers at the present. And you come to Britain, you go in low-paid jobs like the working class. It has an advantage, by the way, because it's building international links between the working class of Britain, the working class of Italy, the working class of Spain. And we have to build, we're not just about the Socialist Party, we're the Committee for the Workers' International. We see the struggle of the working class international and not confined to one country. But Bob was correct when he said, we don't just fight against the existing situation, we have to raise the vision of a new society. I haven't got time to elaborate that today, but the collapse of Stalinism meant the collapse of a planned economy, bureaucratically distorted and so on, but that was a reference point to a certain extent for the labour movement internationally. With the collapse of Stalinism, the capitalists said, we've won. They had the best situation historically that they've ever had, in the sense they had no rivals. There was no challenge. The Socialist and Communist Party went over to a capitalist programme. They've had no challenge, they had a perfect position. They had the possibility of demonstrating the superiority of their system, and it's absolutely failed, as we said it would do. But it's not just a question of a negative. You have to put in its place a positive, but we're struggling against the heritage of Stalinism and the collapse of the planned economies in arguing for socialism today. We have to have a new approach, which is socialist but democratic, in the sense of standing for workers' democracy and so on. And with this generation of new young people in Spain and Italy and Britain and Greece and so on, you will not win them unless you have an idea of a new society that learns the lessons of the past on the basis of workers' democracy. I haven't got time to spell that out, but those ideas will develop just as they are developing in Britain. Let me make it quite clear. We didn't establish what we've established in Britain today. We didn't defeat the poll tax just on the basis of a programme to struggle. We linked at every stage the idea of a socialist transformational society. You cannot, we have to constantly raise that question, and that means what concretely? It means taking over the commanding heights of the economy. Okay, as a step towards that, we'd be in favour in Greece to cancel the debt, nationalise the banks, the same thing in Spain, the same thing in Italy. The stock exchange sharks who've got the debt, they've gambled and they've lost. They're gamblers, so they lose. We won't give them compensation. We'll give the small investors in the stock exchange and so on compensation, maybe on the basis of proven need. Cancel the debt. Imagine if Greece, if Portugal, if Spain and Italy now were to break with capitalism and link up. That would establish a confederation. It would be like a beacon to the working class of Europe. When we fought against the poll tax, we not only fought against the poll tax, remember, we came up against the full might of the state. 24 of our comrades went to jail. 134 went to jail in the poll tax federation who weren't even socialists like us. We're fighting just against the system. That's what it's going to take for us to build a movement to confront capitalism in all its dimensions. I was in South Africa 2 months ago, working with our comrades in South Africa. And we stand there for a new mass party of the working class. And we went to the miners in Rustenburg, in Carltonville, and so on. I personally, maybe you've seen the video or you've seen the photographs where we went to a group of workers in Pretoria who were on strike. We gave them support. There was a mass support for us. The miners in South Africa hate the NUM. They hate Cossato. They hate their former leaders with a venom which it's difficult to see. When you describe about the trade union leaders in Britain, the TUC, that they're not calling a general strike, the simple answer is, why don't you kill the leaders of the TUC? That's how sharp it is. We say, well, we don't do things exactly like that in Britain at the present time. But that's, by the way, a warning to some of the trade union leaders. I had a meeting with Mark Savoca, the leader of the PCS, and the question came up in that discussion, and I said, we've been to South Africa, and this is the mood that exists. We've had to stop members of the new organisation that's being created from going to the councillors of the ANC and trying to kill them. We've had to try and stop that, because this is a life and death question here. It's food on the table. it's defending their families, it's unemployment and so on. It's not just an idea. This is like the miners, this is fighting for the gains of the past and the future. And they hate the ANC, they hate the NUM, and they've created a new party. It's the Workers' and Socialist Party that we've given our support to. They're attempting to try and change some of the unions. If they don't do that, they try and create new unions. That's the reality. And in South Africa, that's a lesson to the right-wing leaders of the trade unions in Britain. It's a lesson to the trade union leaders in Spain and in Italy as well. I remember when the metal workers in the north of Spain were throwing iron at the leaders of the trade unions because they were betraying them in the struggles that were taking place. Everywhere, there's not just a crisis of capitalism. There's a crisis of leadership and there's a crisis of organisation. The working class don't have what they had in the past. They don't have their parties, apart from few small parties in different parts of Europe which still retain a workers' base. But that's the reality that we face. We don't in any way try and prettify this situation. We have a crisis of capitalism. The working class will be forced to struggle. They will test out different trends within the workers' movement. And I believe on the basis of their experience, they will come to see the necessity, first of all, of a struggle. It's not up to us to motivate the struggle. The very conditions of capitalism will have that effect. And then it's a question then to intervene and to try and give a certain direction to that struggle, as we did in Liverpool, as we did in the miners' strike. Remember, we recruited 500 miners to the militant at the height of the strike. I remember speaking on the eve of the Orgreave conflict, and I've never been at a meeting before or since that was like that, where the working class felt its power. If the strike would have been won, we would have won maybe 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 miners and established a tremendous position as we did in Liverpool. So there's nothing inevitable about the outcome of the class struggle. It depends at critical moments in the leadership. We use this period to build the basis for that leadership in order that we can give direction to the workers' movement. We don't ask for any privileges. As Dave has pointed out, our MPs lived on a worker's wage. Joe Higgins in Ireland lives on a worker's wage. Not for abstract reasons, because we like to wear a hair shirt. If you're on 2, 3, 4, 5 times the average wage of a worker, inevitably you will draw away from them. We're for trade union leaders who live on the wage of workers. Then they'll fight for a wage increase, or they'll fight for a change in conditions. The MPs, like Dave Nellis, lived on a worker's wage, like Terry Fields, like Pat Wall, and they gave over and above what they took back to the party. That's the Labour Party, to the Socialist Party, or militant as it was at that stage. We have to establish a new tradition. Not these creatures, as Keith put it. This caste at local level. When we had councillors in Liverpool, they weren't paid. Even the right-wing councillors had a vocation to the working class. To these people, they have a material position. They're a caste. Who are sitting there, accepting these cuts. They're like the people lining up the working class to go into the concentration camps of the past. It's not as bad as that yet, but that's the reality of what this caste is doing. We have to establish a new tradition, a fighting organisation that is against capitalism, has a programme for the way forward, maps out a perspective we've tried to do here today, and has an alternative of raising at each stage the idea of a socialist alternative. If the working class is not that, okay, partial measures like nationalisation of the banks, but always linking it to the idea of the socialist transformation of society, not just in one country, but on a European basis. We opposed the EU as a capitalist institution, but the alternative is not narrow nationalism, of going out and the idea of one country by itself, but of uniting the working class on a continental basis, of standing for socialism and democracy, and that linked to the struggles of the working class internationally. In other words, we have to create a force that in this century, the 21st century, is going to realise the goals of the pioneers, which is the establishment of a world socialist federation. Let those people scorn that idea. What's their alternative? To accept the horrors of capitalism, to accept what it's doing to the world now and the horrors to come, with everything that goes with that? No, that's a blind alley. We take another road. We're, in that sense, optimistic. Marxism is saturated with the spirit of optimism, of mapping out such a road and drawing all the best forces of the working class to our party, and build a force that this time, in your lifetime, if not in mine, this century, we will establish socialism, the goal of the pioneers. Thank you.
Right, comrades, now there's literature on the side to look at. There's also, for the comrades who know Isabel and Sarah, there's a card to sign over there. Also, we're going to retire for a little drink down.